Well, nobody got really all that hurt yesterday. Dwayne Dedman got ejected and Jared Allen had a cold, but nobody really got badly hurt last night. Specifically, no superstars got badly hurt last night. Thank goodness. Holy shimoly. We've been on this ridiculous stretch here lately of big name players getting hurt. Soul crushing. Soul crushing. But not on Tuesday. No, we made it through a seven? Was it 7 games? A 7-game Tuesday without anybody getting battered or bruised. I think the only player that left early with injury was Dwight Powell. I think we can probably weather that storm. We got some breakout games yesterday. I want to spend some time focusing on really 2 or 3 key name players. These are name brand guys that I want to focus on because yesterday was not really about guys that emerged from the card. But over the last 24 hours, one thing that has happened is that we've got 2 pretty big name players likely set to make their return to the NBA in the not too distant future. And that is unquestionably the big news of the day. So let's start there. Before we even introduce the podcast, we are starting with the biggest news that came out of the late afternoon yesterday, which is that Jonathan Isaac, apparition though he may be, has been sent to Lakeland to play with the Orlando Magic G League team, which I think the game is later on today, and it's going to be on ESPN+. So if you guys want to see Jonathan Isaac play like 14 minutes in a G League game, that's going to be on ESPN+. He hasn't played in 2.5 years. Jonathan Isaac last played in the bubble, or did he get hurt right before the bubble? It's been a real long time. Honestly, it doesn't matter. We just went through this same discussion basically with TJ Warren. Now, the difference on the Warren front was that we kept hearing about setbacks and additional injuries and things that were keeping him out. With Jonathan Isaac, we really didn't hear much of anything. And in fact, as recently as like a week ago, they said that he was basically just playing. He was participating in full practices, but didn't have a timetable for a return. This puts a timetable on things. It does. Now, could he be in the G League for a week? Yeah. Could he be down there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks? All of these things are actually possible. They're all conceivable, but we need to try to go on what the more likely outcome is. And I just realized that I'm holding a small screwdriver. I'm just going to hold it the whole damn podcast today. That's the way today's going to go. The most likely situation here is that Isaac is going to use the G League to get his conditioning. This is basically going to be like his preseason, which admittedly he hasn't had one in like the better part of 3 NBA years. But this is now Jonathan Isaac's preseason. And this is frankly kind of smart, which for all the things that the Magic have done super weird on the Jonathan Isaac front, this is actually a good idea. And I wish that more teams would do this type of thing. You just can't convince a star level player or someone who's been in the NBA a really long time or has only been out for like 2 months instead of 2.5 years. You're not going to be able to convince those guys to do it. They're going to be like, nah, screw that. Put me in a ball game, put me in for 15, 16 minutes. But when these guys come back from a big injury on a severe minutes cap, it actually screws with their team more than anyone would care to admit. Yesterday's, that wasn't yesterday. It was 2 days ago, I think. No, it was yesterday. I lose track of time very easily. Yesterday's Steph Curry, who played 31 minutes, by the way, return screwed up the Warriors a little bit. And obviously, they're going to be much, much better as he gets his legs underneath him. But this is what always happens. And this is more of a sports betting thing, but you can apply it here on this Jonathan Isaac situation as well. In sports betting, it is common practice among those who actually are kind of sharp about it, and less so among the so many big name people that now feel like they need to sports bet. God, kill me with this, ESPN. When a superstar goes down, it's common practice to bet on that team because the line tends to over adjust to their impact. And a team, the remaining players tend to play harder when their superstar goes down. Oh, we need to cover for this guy. They run out of gas 2 or 3 games later, and then you kind of get this plateauing. But the flip happens when a superstar returns to a ball club. All of the players tend to give less than 100% because they're trying to work their superstar back in. They feel like they don't have to do as much. They kind of, quote unquote, made it through the hard times, while at the same time, they're welcoming back someone who doesn't have their legs back. They're going to be rusty. Nothing is 100%. So I'm sure you can find an example in the not so distant past where a superstar came back and the team was totally fine. But for the most part, you saw it with Golden State, and you're going to see it with lots of teams the rest of the way. And I sort of spot bet these days because I don't have time to handicap the entire card. When a superstar comes back, it screws with the team's chemistry for a game or two. Even if it's someone that's always been there, like Steph Curry. And this was like the perfect storm because this was a game where the Warriors figured they could just like kind of screw around and beat a Phoenix team missing their entire lineup while also working Steph back in. But then it's not a coincidence that Steph shot 36% on ridiculously high volume because it was that first game back. So this is my plea to the NBA. If you got a player ready to come back, and this is as a fantasy enthusiast, and they need, and, in Steph's defense, so maybe this isn't the world's greatest example. He played 31 minutes here. Maybe Andrew Wiggins would have been a better example because he played whatever it was, like 15, 16 minutes. And then he got ratcheted up here to 29. When guys are coming back with a minutes cap, let them play a couple of games in a G League. Let them get their wind back in the G League. And more than anything else, if it's a player that like in Kevin Durant's case, you're not going to get him to go play a week in the G League, and he already had his preseason. So his conditioning's not going to be completely boned when he comes back. But what about these guys like a Chris Middleton who tried to come back and ended up hurt? Because, and this is like reason 1 billion why we don't draft injured players. They come back, they try to have their preseason during the season, and other stuff happens. JJJ is the exception to the rule. There's always one exception every year, and that's the guy that everybody's going to focus their eyes on the following season when they're like, hey, this works all the time. Last year it was Pascal Siakam. He came back from injury and he was just fine the rest of the year. JJJ's come back from injury and he's been amazing so far this year. There's always one. But a lot of the time, most of the time, the guy coming back from injury tries to get going too fast and other stuff breaks down. I think it was Paul George like 3 years ago where this was like the perfect example of it. He tried to come back too soon, or he tried to come back and have his preseason during the season, especially guys like PG that are always dinged up. Guys need their preseason in a non-competitive environment. They just have to get loose. They have to get their conditioning right in a non-competitive environment, or something is going to go wrong. So that's what's happening here with Jonathan Isaac. Coming back around to the story we were actually talking about here. Jonathan Isaac is going to get his preseason at the G League level. He's practiced. He's got his wind back, but he doesn't have his legs back. And it could be a long time. So if you're contemplating on the Jonathan Isaac front, here's where I think you stand with that. 1, I wouldn't touch him in a head-to-head league in 1,000 light years. I guess it's a distance. Bad science, Dan. I wouldn't touch him in a head-to-head league under any circumstance, even if I had an injured list slot to stash him in, because there's no guarantee this year that he ever plays more than 20 minutes in an NBA game. Obviously, the upside here with Jonathan Isaac can go all the way back to 1920, not the year 1920, the 2019-2020 season, to see that in 29 minutes a game, he was number 17 in 9-cat. Basically putting up JJJ numbers, what he's done this year with fewer points. 2.5 blocks, 1.5 steals. He was basically at 4 defensive stats. He was beating Anthony Davis in defensive stats per ball game when Jonathan Isaac got hurt right at the end. Yeah. And then he missed a bunch of time, and then he tried to come back, and it didn't go all that well. He played 34 games that year. If you want to go back, you can go back farther if you want to on Isaac. I don't know that we necessarily need to because, it's all very straightforward. The previous year, he played about 26 minutes per ball game, and he was just inside the top 100, but that was because his field goal percent was super low. He was also he didn't really have his legs because he was coming back from another thing. I know, repetitive stress or repetitive. What's the old adage? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But that plays into this thing also. Mobile. He's at least 2 defensive stats per ball game. So I think you could see a scenario where he's playing 22, 23 minutes a game and he's inside the top 100 pretty comfortably, but he's not going to play in back-to-backs. No chance. Not even zero. Not even one. Zero chance that he plays in back-to-backs because Orlando's not like gunning for anything this year. Zero chance that he's playing significant minutes in the month of January. I'm fully aware that there are 3 weeks left in the month of January. So there's really only one needle-threading time when you should consider a Jonathan Isaac pickup, and that is Roto, Games Cap, 9 Cat, where you are not super far behind in Games Cap because you're going to be squatting on this dude for at least 3 weeks before you even consider dropping him into your lineup. But it's a massive home run hack. Pitcher might throw us a curveball and bounce it, and we might be 4 feet out in front of that thing. It might be that like that Jurickson Profar swing this year on a Clayton Kershaw curveball that bounced like 10 feet in front of home plate. It was the biggest gap between bat and ball in the StatCast era. That might be what happens here with Jonathan Isaac. But on the 5% chance that from the All-Star break until the end of the year, he plays 24 minutes a game in a Roto Games Cap format, I would take it. Because he is in 24 or more minutes per game. He is a game changer in 2 statistical categories. That's how you get up into the second round when you don't score. You are hyper elite in other stuff. And he wasn't a great rebounder. He's not a great passer. His free throw number was fine. His field goal number was meh. Steals, blocks. That was it. The other news of a player coming back is Ricky Rubio. Now, I feel quite differently, actually, about Ricky Rubio because I don't actually think there's much in the way of fantasy upside with him. And I know what you're going to say. Your retort should be, but Dan, Rubio looked pretty good last year. And I would say to you, yes, you are absolutely right. Ricky Rubio did look good last year. But Ricky Rubio looked good last year when he was the second playmaker on that Cavs team behind Darius Garland because Colin Sexton was already out for the year. They didn't have Karis LeVert. They didn't have Donovan Mitchell. Even if you put Rubio in front of LeVert at some point down the line, Garland and Mitchell are still in front of him. So this isn't a case. Rubio needs like almost full starters minutes and ball control to have fantasy value because his is tied up in assists and steals. Steals you get by being on the court a long time. Assists you get by having the basketball in your hand. If he doesn't have the basketball in his hand for a large chunk of the ball game, there's just no way for him to get to value because he's not a great scorer. His field goal percent is low. His free throw percent is solid, but he needs to be shooting for that to matter. It's not like Jonathan Isaac where he can just be out there. No one even has to look at him on the offensive side, and he could still put up some kind of fantasy value, and that's why you take that home run hack. And for Ricky Rubio, it wouldn't be a home run hack. Even in a good case scenario, he's probably near the top 100. My guess is he's outside the top 150. And with that, I say welcome to the show, everybody. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a sports ethos presentation. I am your host, Dan Bespris. And I know we had a lot to talk about before we even got going. I am on Twitter at Dan Bespris, DANBESBRIS. Take a brief, fleeting moment to go over there and drop a follow on my name. I do so much work on social media. I keep trying to add new, fun, and interesting things to do on social, and I'm going to continue to try to do that until the end of time because, I mean, that's one way to grow this thing. Do a podcast every day. Hustle your butt off on social media and try to win a bunch. And beyond that, that's, I I don't know. What more can I do? It's like quoting an Encanto song here. Oops. I'm pausing the recorded stream to remind everybody because there are a bunch more live viewers now since the last time I checked in. Hi, live viewers. And hello, everybody watching after the fact on YouTube. Please, please take a moment to hit that thumbs up button. A bunch of you have done so. I'm very grateful to that. Please, the rest of you, take a second, click that thumbs up button. It's a huge deal. I am taking this break and kind of moving through it slowly because I want to see the thumbs up numbers continue to click. Thank you to everybody in the chat room that's saying I got you. Thank you to everybody saying hello. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube page. I'm going to try to do this basically every time that my kids are in school and I'm going to have a babysitter in the afternoon. I'm going to try to do these live shows as often as humanly possible. And so with your help, we can continue to grow our YouTube page, but we need those thumbs ups. We need those subscribes. They are everything in the growth of a YouTube page because that's like telling other people about it without actually having to do anything else. So please, please take a second, go hit those buttons. I can see a handful of you that, whoops, I dropped my tiny screwdriver. I can see a handful of you that are here that haven't done it yet. So please take that second and do it while I take this sip of water. And then we're going to get through the card from yesterday. I'm also going to switch which of these two little screens you're looking at is bigger because you've seen enough of my dumb face. Let's flip it. Pow. And now let me turn the recording software back on and we'll dive right in. Hey, quickly, I want to mention also that we are recruiting here at Sports Ethos. So if you're watching this thing and you're like, I could do that crap, hit me. We're looking for fantasy NBA, MLB, NFL, and NHL. Folks that are not currently analysts that think they can make the jump. It's a hustle, man. You got to be ready to grind. You guys see how much time I spend on this stuff. Folks will be running the blurb feed, writing articles. It's a blast. Hit me up on Twitter at Dan Bespers. That's the best way to do it. Or you can email roster@sportsethos.com on the very silly chance that you don't use social media at all, which you should if you're playing fantasy basketball. That's how you can get in touch. But let's go over to the box score sheet here and take a look at what went on yesterday. There's a few big name guys, like I mentioned earlier, that I want to kind of focus on because around the periphery yesterday, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff. Detroit was down a lot of players. No Bojan Bogdanovic, no Jalen Duren, in addition to all the usual stuff. No Isaiah Stewart. So Nerlens Noel got a start. Played 21 minutes, 5 points, 5 boards, a steal, and 3 blocks. He's another guy that in 20-some-odd minutes can get you 3 defensive stats per ball game. Odds are it won't happen again, but Jalen Duren's already been ruled out for Detroit's next ball game, so I guess you never know. And if there's an opportunity where Duren and Stewart are each out at the same time again, hell yeah. In fact, it actually looks like it's tonight. Yeah, as of about 25 minutes ago, it looks like both of those players were ruled out. So Nerlens time, baby. 21 minutes, by the way, is enough for him. I should point out. He doesn't need to do very much. That's enough. And who knows? Maybe they won't lose by 30. Maybe the game won't be a 40-point game at the end of the third quarter, and you'll see even a little bit more of some of these guys. Bojan Bogdanovic sounds like he's back in, so this was a rest game for him, which gives, I think, a pretty clear indicator that he's not going to be playing every game here leading up to the trade deadline. And so if you had notions of thinking about someone like a Sadiq Bey or a Kevin Knox or a Hamidou Diallo, nah, just go in a different direction. And then we saw Killian Hayes, because this is what's going to happen with him. He'll have those big games. He'll have these quiet ones, and it'll balance out. On the Philly side, I think you guys may need to remind you again that the Anthony Melton takes time to figure out what his role is. We saw it at the beginning of the year when he was on the bench. He started to figure out by about his third or fourth game off the bench. Then he moved into a starting role when James Harden at that point went down. Stayed there for a while because Embiid missed a few games. Then Maxey went down for a month and a half. Now, it took him about 3 games to figure out how to be a starter. Now it's going to take him a few games to remember how to be a reserve again. We saw Melton with really good usage in only 18 minutes yesterday. His minutes are going to trend back up. A lot of this had to do with the blowout. He didn't get his last 6, 7, 8 minutes of the ball game. He'll probably be in the 25 to 30 window most days off the bench, as opposed to more like 30 to 35 as a starter. So yes, will his value take a hit with everybody back? Of course. Everybody's value takes a hit when everybody's back. Melton's will come down, but I see him inside the top 100. I would not panic if you saw 18 minutes yesterday, because you should look at everybody's minutes in the starting five. And the only one of them that played more than 26 was Tobias Harris. Embiid 24, Harden 20, just barely hit 26, Maxey 23, PJ Tucker 21. They didn't have to play. They had to play half a ball game. So Melton was one of the players I wanted to talk about, and I kept that one relatively brief. Josh Giddey triple-doubled in a loss for Oklahoma City. Jalen Williams just kind of quietly plunking along here. He continues to be a startable asset. I got a question on Twitter earlier today about whether or not I thought that Jalen Williams would continue to be startable when Jeremiah Robinson-Earl and Alexei Pokusevski come back. And my answer is we don't fully know. My guess is that he hangs around right near the edge, like right on the border of being startable there, because that's kind of where he was before they went down. His minutes were good, but his touches weren't. And if that's what happens again, then he probably, I mean, you might be looking at more of like a schedule stream type of valuation for him, but there's no reason for you to do anything about it right now because he's fine and you can just sort of keep rolling with him as long as he continues to be fine. On the other side, Jimmy Butler, 23 for 23 at the free throw line, but he's rostered everywhere. Butler, by the way, up to number 10 per game, 22 by totals. He's beating his ADP, which was 30 in both. I know everybody wants to hate on Jimmy and how many games he misses, and it is a pain in the butt, but he's actually beating his ADP by totals and per game right now. So he's been a fantasy win to this point. Max Strus was solid. This was a ball game where the Heat were missing pretty much everybody also. Kyle Lowry was out. Caleb Martin's been out for a while. Bam Adebayo was out. Tyler Hero was out. So you had effectively 4 of the regular starters gone for the Heat. And Victor Oladipo, there's a lot that actually we need to cover with Miami. So let me slow down here for a second. First of all, Victor Oladipo appears to be startable even when the Heat are basically at full strength. I don't know that it's for sure when everyone's back, but I think we can safely say that if there's even one guy out, that Oladipo is worth a start in basically any format. I think he's going to be tougher to roster in head-to-head because he's still not playing in back-to-backs, and not every ball game he's going to do as much as he did in this one because the entire team was hurt. But Roto Games Cap, again, with one guy out, he's sort of barely a start. With more than that, he's a very obvious start. Max Strus is a different burger because he, in my estimation, needs like 3 guys out because he needs a ton of shots, and he needs like pretty much anybody on this team that does stuff to get out of the way. That's how he got enough shots to be fantasy relevant. He's going to get a ton of shots. He's not going to be because most of his value is tied up in 3-pointers. So with Strus, he'd be one of my first ones to cut in terms of streamers as guys come back. And along with Strus, Gabe Vincent is another guy I think you can consider streaming as long as, like, let's say Lowry and Hero are each out in the next one. Let's say hypothetically those 2 guys are still out and maybe Bam comes back. I think you could probably still start Vincent as the secondary ball handler behind Jimmy Butler. I don't know if you'd start Strus because Adebayo is going to take a lot of those shots. And then finally, Orlando Robinson, who got himself into foul trouble, rebounds, steals, and blocks, and field goal percent. I think he actually is a decent Bam streamer. If Adebayo misses another ball game, I do think that it's not a super high ceiling for Robinson, but it's a decently high floor. This is actually a startable fantasy line in 24 minutes, and that's with a ton of foul trouble and kind of sort of everything going wrong, which, by the way, could happen again because, young dude trying to settle in and play with the starters, easier said than done. Toronto, Charlotte, just a couple very quick footnotes on this ball game. Dennis Smith Jr., 24 minutes. It looks like that's probably where he's going to be stuck. So use him as a steals streamer for now, but nothing else. Terry Rozier, ladies and gentlemen, top 20 over the last week I know, very small sample size, but I believe it's the first time he's had a week inside the top 50 all season long. Field goal percent ticking up for Terry, right near top 130 on the year now, after really sitting in like the 160, 170 range for a long time. Are we finally seeing the great leveling for Rozier? Did it just take a little bit longer? Is the constant buy low recommendation finally going to pay off? We'll find out. Oh, and Mason Plumlee, he's in one of his little heaters again. Every 2 weeks, we talk about how Plumlee's in a little heater. He has these 2, 3, 4 games in a row where he looks better, then he cools off, then he gets better, then he cools off. Just, use sparingly. But if you need field goal percent, rebounds, and assists out of a big man, that's what it'll get you, because he doesn't get much in the way of defensive stats, and his free throw shooting is atrocious. Cleveland's defense, not surprisingly, suffered when Jared Allen left early with an illness. He'll be fine. No reason to worry there. You're not picking up Lamar Stevens, but obviously when the center goes down, Evan Mobley gets a big jump. His value is way higher when Jared Allen is hurt. It's a great time to have Mobley for a game or two if Allen has to miss any more time. Utah is the more interesting team in this one, because now we got to look again at Utah without Kelly Olynyk, and they went heavy on the Walker Kessler. Now, admittedly, we do see teams go bigger against Cleveland because we know the Cavs like to play big. Mobley, Allen, Kevin Love, they tend to run a lot of larger dudes out there. So, yes, I pretty strongly believe that was some of what you saw with Utah's lineups yesterday, because Jared Vanderbilt only got to play 17 minutes. Not all. Some of it was also the fact that Walker Kessler just continues to show steady improvement. He was a +6 in a game they won by 4. Mike Conley was actually team best +8. And I have thoughts on a bunch of Utah chats. First of all, Walker Kessler should have been on your rosters for the last 6-7 weeks anyway. But someone was like, should I add him on Twitter? And I was like, what the hell kind of league is this where no one had Walker Kessler? Absolutely. Must be on your team and must be started. We knew that was going to be the case when Olynyk went down, that he would get a big bump. And 30 minutes is magically large. Jared Vanderbilt, hang on a little bit longer. Some of this felt matchup relevant, because Vando had actually been better like 3 of his last 4 ball games coming into this one, so don't punt after just 1 ball game. Jordan Clarkson, he's been a bit better since I called him out for being horrendous efficiency. He's still outside the top 140. He still profiles much better as a points league option, but he has been top 90 in 9-cat over the last month, pretty much since I called him unrosterable. The fear, of course, is that he's going to hit a cold spell again, and then he'll go back to that kind of top 200 stretch. So, again, use when it makes sense. Mike Conley, he's really not been super engaged on the offensive side. He's just kind of steering the boat for Utah right now. That's the expression I've been using with him, where he's out there, but is he really out there? He's just putting the ball in the right spot. He's running an offense without kind of being involved in it. And he had a pretty good first half. I think he had like 8 points and 3 assists at halftime. And he just really didn't do anything in the second half. The steals are a little lower. The assists are fine, but would I drop him outright? I think you can, honestly, at this point. He's really an assists specialist, schedule streamer for now. Someone would probably pick him up if you dropped him, which, of course, is going to give everybody pause, but then they'll probably end up dropping him too down the line. So if you don't badly need assists, you could, suppose you could just bench him. That might be the easier play. It feels a little bit less final, but he hasn't been startable lately. And we're talking like a good, 4 weeks of that at this point. The other name that I mentioned on yesterday's podcast when we got the Olynyk report that he was out for a couple of weeks is Malik Beasley. Because there is going to be some of that trickle down extra stuff. Olynyk's minutes are going to get spread between Kessler, Vanderbilt, and then who's the next guy in the pecking order when everybody kind of gets shifted up a spot in defensive position, and it's Beasley. He probably goes back to being, we do these streamer boards on Twitter, more of like a one burger kind of streamer. He moves himself just above schedule stream to everyday stream, I believe. Orlando was a team we were kind of taking a reset button on just to see where all the pieces were falling, because I thought Bol Bol was going to play in this one, and he didn't even play. So let's hit the reset button again on Orlando's next ball game. For now, I have the same feeling that I had on yesterday's show, which is that Franz, Fultz, Wendell Carter Jr., and Banchero, those are the 4 guys you can start in category leagues and nobody else. Cole Anthony had a bad one, so that kind of helped prove my point. Jalen Suggs, his minutes went down. That continued to prove my point. These are points leagues type of guys, but even their minutes are not guaranteed right now. Nothing on Portland. They're the same old, same old. They're a team that's a little bit in free fall right now. I don't know what they're going to do about it. I guess we'll see. Warriors got Steph back, which means that Dante DiVincenzo is a drop. Easy little recap there on the Warriors. Phoenix side, everybody was out. No Shamet, who was already filling in for Devin Booker. Still no Cam Johnson, no Chris Paul, no DeAndre Ayton. Their pets' heads are falling off. Mikal Bridges was pretty much the only regular that was still out there. So the Suns trotted a starting lineup out there of Mikal Bridges, Dario Saric, who ended up having a really nice ball game, Bismack Biyombo, who was decent in his 17 minutes, but yeah, no, stop. Torrey Craig, who doubled with a couple of blocks, and Dwayne Washington, who had 21 points on 17 shots and went real usage crazy in a win. Yeah, Warriors should have taken this game a little bit more seriously. They didn't. They paid for it. Oh, by the way, on the Warriors side, you got to try to sell on Jordan Poole. If you can get like a top 80 type of guy, I would do it. You might not be able to, in which case you might just kind of have to see how this thing shakes out. Maybe he goes on a little efficiency run here. But let's talk more about the Suns. What do we do? Well, Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton are considered day-to-day right now. Landry Shamet also day-to-day. Excuse me. They have 3 guys who are day-to-day. Cam Payne was another player who was out that I didn't even mention. He's out for almost 2 weeks still. Cam Johnson, we just have no reports on. We saw him like running straight lines, whatever it was, 10 days ago, and nothing since then. So I think we can safely assume, and then with Booker, we're still looking at a few more weeks as well. So I think we can assume those guys are still out for a little bit longer. What we don't know is, will Chris Paul show up? Suns signed Saben Lee earlier today, which gives me the impression that they expect their point guards to miss another couple of ball games, but I guess we'll see. Does he now get in the mix and play a bunch of minutes? That's a big question mark. Do they continue to give Dwayne Washington copious minutes and usage? I don't know. Bridges, obviously, we don't need to talk about. Let's say DeAndre Ayton misses another ball game. Well, I think that means that Dario Saric is a guy you should strongly consider. He picked up a lot of that kind of interior stuff while also being, technically he was the power forward, but Jock Landale came in as center for a bit. Saric did a lot of center-y type of stuff from the power forward spot. He's probably startable if Ayton misses another ball game. I don't know if I would do it, but maybe. You know what? Maybe you guys probably just want to know, Dan, who would you start in the next ballgame? It's so contingent on who's in and who's out. If all of these guys are still out again for Phoenix's next ballgame, yeah, I would start Torrey Craig. I'd probably start Dwayne Washington. I'd probably start Dario Saric. I don't know if I would start Damian Lee. He went 14 for 14 at the free throw line. He's 22 for 22 for them over his last couple of ball games. A lot of his value is tied up in high volume foul shooting, which to me is a little bit of a question mark, because if he's not effective at scoring in a given ball game, the other stuff is not really there to support it. I would not start Biyombo, and I would certainly not start Jock Landale. Now, if DeAndre Ayton comes back, you wipe Landale off the board, you wipe Saric off the board. If Chris Paul comes back, you wipe Dwayne Washington off the board. If Landry Shamet comes back, you wipe even the thought of Damian Lee off the board, and possibly even the thought of Torrey Craig, although, he gets defensive stats, he gets rebounds. There's a little bit more to support the high floor, low ceiling with him. But the short answer, which is not really what I'm good at in podcasting, the short answer is we need to see who's playing for Phoenix in their next ball game. Hey, want to remind everybody watching on the YouTube stream before we finish up our box score recap that I will be doing a lightning round of questions from the YouTube chat room. So if you're here, please take a second, click that thumbs up button, subscribe to our YouTube page. But also, this is a bonus just for live viewers. Hang out to the end of the show, and I'll be answering all the questions from the YouTube chat in a lightning round. Throw them over there. It's over here, this direction if you're on a PC, and it's down below if you're on mobile. Also, do follow me on Twitter at Dan Vespers. Please do, again, hit that thumbs up button if you haven't done it so far, and subscribe to our YouTube page. Now, let's finish up the box scores. Clippers beat Dallas 113-101, final game of the night. And, we got good news in this one. Kawhi Leonard looking like Kawhi Leonard. Oh, man, was this like vintage Kawhi. I don't mean to alarm you all, but Kawhi is up to number 54 per game in 9-cat right now. Over the last 2 weeks, Kawhi Leonard is number 9 in 9-cat. I know, small sample size, but you know what? He looks like Kawhi. High volume, free throw, big positive. Field goal percent, positive. Steals are back. Scoring, threes, rebounding. It's all coming back. 12 for 12 at the foul line in this ballgame, 9 for 12 from the field, including 3 3-pointers. Phew. Funny thing is now with Kawhi, who, what has he played? 19 games on the season at this point? Like, there's just no way that he's going to get anywhere near the proper number of games. He's 20 behind a lot of the NBA. And he'll fall likely farther behind because he's going to sit out back-to-backs. But what did we say at the beginning of the year when you drafted Kawhi Leonard, which unfortunately, I didn't end up with him, good or bad news, I suppose. I didn't end up with him in nearly as many places as I thought I would, because in a lot of the roto leagues I was in, I don't know if people were listening to this pod or if other pods were saying that he was going lower than we all expected. His ADP on Yahoo didn't parallel his actual draft position in the various leagues that I found myself in. So, like, I thought I was going to be able to get him in the middle of the third to late third round, and then all of a sudden he was going, like, at the end of the second round. But in the couple of places that I got him, we got to think about it from this perspective. He has that Jimmy Butler type thing going on where, like, look, Jimmy's only lagging like 10 games behind most of the NBA right now. That's why by totals, he's still inside the second round and beating his ADP. But let's say that Kawhi mostly keeps up with the league the rest of the way and rolls like top 7, top 10 range from now until the end of the year. He might actually get inside the top 30 by totals. Seems insane to think about it, but it's not a dead possibility. Oh, I'm so excited about Kawhi finally cooking here. He's going to miss games. Just like get used to it. Paul George still out. So Norman Powell continues to be the play there. I got a billion questions on Terrence Mann. If he's the starting point guard and one of the 2 Clippers stars, I should say, is sidelined, I would play him. And thank goodness Mann kind of saved yesterday's line with a good fourth quarter because it was looking real ugly before then. If both superstars are in, I'm not playing Terrence Mann because I don't think he's going to get enough usage in that spot. And if both superstars are out, then you definitely play him. But that's, I think, a pretty obvious and logical conclusion from the things I had said previously. A couple other notes on the Clippers. Ivica Zubac's big-time foul trouble, and then they just sort of didn't really give him any extra time late in the ball game. He had 3 fouls in the first 4 minutes of the game. So it was like 4 minutes in the first half and a dozen in the second half. Don't panic on Zubac. He still managed to put up an okay line, and that's probably going to keep people from panicking. But lately, he's been quite a bit better for the Clips. So don't freak out there. Again, Powell's my favorite streamer when a superstar is out. Mann is kind of second in line. Nick Batum and Rob Covington each deserve just a brief moment here towards the end of the podcast. Batum is so good in 9-cat. But he goes through these waves that are almost always tied into his health. He gets hurt after like 2 to 3 weeks of good 9-cat play. Then he comes back and he doesn't quite look like himself. and then he rounds into shape after like 4 or 5 games, and then you can squeeze like 3 to 5 games out of him before he gets hurt again. Frankly, it's too much work in head-to-head. And in Roto Games Cap, you pretty much need to wait until he puts up his first good Roto line and then try to pounce on it for like 3 games. It's a lot of work for not that much return. And then with Covington, I did not see this one coming, but keep a very close watch on it because my instinct tells me that Paul George comes back and Covington loses most of the playing time he got yesterday. But right now, Reggie Jackson is kind of doghoused a little bit, little dinged up, but mostly doghoused. John Wall, they don't need point guards as much with Kawhi back because the offense is pretty much going to run through him. And then when Paul George is back too, they also really, really don't need a point guard at that point. So Clippers kind of leaning into a different look right now. If that look is we're just going to play a crap ton of wings and count on our superstars to initiate the offense, that would be really good news for Covington because he only needs about 24 minutes to have value with the Clippers. We saw that last year. He did it in like 22 minutes. So don't completely ignore it. Again, probably doesn't stick when Paul George comes back because Batum, Marcus Morris, Terrence Mann, these guys are ahead of him, Powell in the pecking order. But if they decide they want to go that sort of defense and 3-ball stuff, and Rocco certainly fits that mold, it's not out of the question that he could pop up as someone who can really churn out a ton of value quickly, fast. And that was your Tuesday card, and that was your return of the injured guys here on the podcast. We got a lot left to cover. Let's talk about the Wednesday card really fast before we wrap things up here on the recorded podcast side. Chicago in Washington. Bulls likely to be without DeMar DeRozan. He's listed as doubtful. There was a brief period where he got a questionable tag, and I thought, not with a quad strain. He ain't playing in this ball game, and I think I'm probably going to be right on that one, but I suppose you never know. I still think he misses a week, and I love Patrick Williams as the fill-in there while he's gone. Washington, I expect, well, we have to see who's healthy enough to play. Porzingis and Gafford are questionable for this ball game. That makes a really big difference on what else you do with the Wizards, because if Porzingis is out on top of Beal, then Monte Morris becomes a must-play guy because he just has to take the extra usage. So watch the health report on the Wizards. We'll have some thoughts on that over on social media. Again, that's at Dan Bespris over there. Minnesota, not much right now. I think we had a pretty good feel for them. Slow-mo's a go. Naz Reid, probably not enough playing time right now. Detroit, with Boyan in, Duran and Stewart out, I still think you could probably play Noel, as we talked about earlier in the pod. Indiana, nothing. Knicks, nothing really. Nothing surprising, I guess I should say. The only thing we're looking at is, does RJ Barrett play? If he does, then you bench Emmanuel quickly. Easy. New Orleans and Boston, there are some angles in this ballgame. So I'll come back around to New Orleans, Boston, because that one I can't really do in perfect lightning round mode. Milwaukee, Atlanta, not a whole lot there. Bucks have a couple of schedule stream type of guys. Atlanta, Trae Young got ruled out. So that is something. I don't know that anybody necessarily moves across the cut line or the ad line, depending on what direction you're moving towards the line. But Bogdanovich and DeJounte Murray are going to get a ton more on offense. That's great for those guys in particular. Spurs, Keldon Johnson is questionable. Whether he plays actually makes a really big difference to guys like Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, etc. So keep an eye on the status report there. Memphis, I believe Ja Morant is expected back for this ball game. So, womp womp to Tyus Jones because he's so good as a fill-in. But otherwise, nothing really for the Grizz. Phoenix on the back-to-back in Denver. This is a brutal back-to-back. I can't imagine the Suns' skeleton crew has anything left in the tank. The only question here is whether Denver takes them seriously or you get a Nuggets performance like they gave against the Lakers, which was like, you know what, we're just going to coast and we know we're going to win this thing by about a dozen. You could probably fade the Suns. I don't know. Maybe they've got something left in the tank. Oh, good Lord. Would any of those regulars make their return for Phoenix? Look, you have to watch the health news on Phoenix, but this is a tough game. This is a late night trip from Golden State Pacific time into Mountain time into altitude on the back-to-back. Suns are going to be completely gassed. So it's probably not a great time to use those streamers. Denver, same stuff as usual. Houston, literally nothing at all. And Sacramento, Kevin Huerter just got tossed on the injury report with a flu or a cold. If he sits, I think it just makes Malik Monk a tiny bit safer as more of a schedule stream type of play. But I don't know that I would go much deeper than that. That's probably about as far as I would go. Let me come back to New Orleans, Boston here before we put the pin officially in today's episode of Fantasy NBA Today. Pelicans, so Herb Jones is now on the injury report as well. We know Zion and Brandon Ingram are still out. Trey Murphy is really hard to use, even though all indicators say he needs to do something. Everybody's out. Surely he has to be involved. And yet lately he hasn't really been. I think you kind of have to wait until he shows that he has confidence again. Because otherwise you're going to get this guy who doesn't really want to be a part of what's going on with their offense. Najee Marshall should be a really good start on points league side. Larry Nance, I think this feels like the kind of game where they're going to need Larry Nance a lot against an excellent offensive team that's just going to completely decimate Jonas Valanciunas on defense. So I think Nance actually has a pretty decent ball game here. And then on the Boston side, Time Lord is questionable because he's going to rest one half of a Celtics back-to-back. It might be this one. Who the hell is Boston playing on Thursday? In Brooklyn. 2 marquee games for the Celtics on a back-to-back. So I have no idea which game Time Lord's going to play. But either way, Al Horford is fine. Please stop asking me about that. Those two guys can coexist, and they did it for an entire bleeping season last year where the Celtics made the finals. The real question for Boston is who fills in for Marcus Smart in this one, because it was weirdly Grant Williams in their last ball game. I still think that Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon are the higher odds play, but at least now we know that it's not a guarantee. If I'm going to choose anybody, I choose Derek White because I like the fact that he gets defensive stats. He just has a higher floor, and so you give him a little bit more point guard job work in the first unit, and that's only good for him. Malcolm Brogdon relies more on the scoring stuff, which they didn't really need from Marcus Smart anyway, but it is minutes. You get him out there for a few more minutes. That's good for his fantasy value. Derek White would be my favorite fill-in, then Brogdon, then Grant Williams, even though it kind of went the other way in Boston's last ball game. And that is your Wednesday show here. This, again, was Fantasy NBA Today, a Sports Ethos presentation. Thank you, everybody, once again. Recorded pod listeners, I love you all so very much, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. We'll break down this medium-size everyday card as we continue to roll along. Video listeners, don't depart because it's lightning round time, which means I can now close this window. And hey, quick reminder again, please hit that thumbs up. Please, 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 please take a second. If you haven't done it yet, I am officially begging you. I try to do it 3 or 4 times a show. Begging, hit the thumbs up button. I want to see that thing continue to rise. It is how we're going to continue to grow our YouTube page because new people then find the show. And new people, please subscribe. We're going to be doing cool stuff like this all the time. We're going to get actually a lot of baseball and football stuff going here this coming season as well. So that'll be a big deal. We'd also like to add some more DFS shows to our Sports Ethos YouTube page. But let's go through this thing. Lightning round in the chat room. MPJ or Wendell Carter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. He has the higher ceiling. Michael Porter Jr., while kind of coasting, is right around while Wendell is in his better spot. If you're in head-to-head league with first-rounders like Jokic and LaMelo with 2-game weeks, do you sell now or hold? Are we talking like for the playoffs? If you're talking for the playoffs, LaMelo, I think I would consider trying to move. I don't know that you could move Jokic and have a team that even resembles what it used to be. Dirty Steve! There you go. I love it. A rubber band ball that comes from the grocery store. Well, this is in reference to, because I cut off a part at the beginning of the podcast, so folks that watching after the fact could dive right in. This is a ball of return address stickers that have come in the mail. I mean, there's thousands in here now. Big old ball. I love that, Steve. I never buy veggies that have the rubber band. We're mostly like strawberries, blueberries, bananas, cucumbers, and apples and green beans around here. The rubber band is like asparagus, scallions. Oh, 2-game playoff. Okay, yeah. So same answer. Jokic, I don't think you could. It would blow up your team. Thanks, dude. That's very kind of you. Oof. Not in head-to-head. Is that really true? I haven't even looked that far ahead. Do the Bulls really only have one game next week? Wowzers. Yeah, you know what? I'm good with that. Shams came out. He said Milton's not that far away. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it, but it's the first positive thing we've heard on Chris in like a month. So great time to buy low. You can get him for crap at this point. Points leagues, you're probably going Killian Hayes because the reason that he doesn't have terrific category league value is that his percentages aren't very good. His other stuff is decent. He's been scoring a little better. His assists and steals are pretty good. Yeah, you go full-time starting point guard here. Oh, you didn't even need to trade for him? Somebody dropped him? Yeah, pick him up. That was to Middleton. Yeah, absolutely. Jabari Smith must roster 14-team points league for sure. We talked about that one earlier in the show, but no, not really. Hello. Yes, I did. That's an emoji that apparently doesn't show up on my computer screen. What was that one? Well, I don't know. But yes, 14 teamers for sure. Kevin Porter Jr. He's been hanging around right around the edge of the top 100 this year. He's number 99 actually on Basketball Monster right now because his percentages are brutal. I think this is probably about where he's at. Top 100, which is frankly better than I thought. So I guess I'll give him some credit for beating what I thought was going to be more like 120 to 140 range. But startable, you just have to have a team that's good in percentages to kind of deal with his stuff. I'll go Patrick Williams. I think the Nets are going to be kind of careful with TJ. Oh, if it's for one game, I'll go Patrick Williams. If it's for 3 weeks, I'll go TJ Warren. And it's rest of season, I go Larry Nance. Hashtag Burger Watch. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll happen. Rookies do tend to improve their percentages, field goal in particular, as the year goes on. No reason to think that it wouldn't happen with Jabari Smith Jr. The question is, will it be very small or medium? I think you should be able to get Middleton for less than Michael Porter Jr. right now. People are very frustrated with him. If he comes back and is healthy, he's a top 50 fantasy play. Seth, Joe, or Utah? Brooklyn fill-in. Best fantasy game is Seth Curry. But the honest to goodness, actual reality answer of this is that it's going to depend on who's good on a given night for their minutes. So probably none. Like the entire stretch that Kevin Durant is out, I don't know that any of these guys is actually top 100. You might get them for like a couple games here and there where each one is good enough. But knowing what night it's going to happen, we just can't know in advance. So I'm basically dodging. That's what I'm doing personally. You don't have to. That's where I'm at. Better long-term hold. Jalen McDaniels, Manuel Quickley, or Patrick Williams, where they're all successful right now because of injuries. Quickley appears to be pretty much at the end of his because RJ Barrett's about to come back. So he's not my pick here. DeRozan, I'm guessing, is out somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks. Patrick Williams is going to put up numbers probably a tiny bit better than Jalen McDaniels over that stretch. But with McDaniels, you've got Oubre out for another month, basically, and then Gordon Hayward, who's just terrible. So long-term hold, I'll go Jalen McDaniels because he has the longest injury replacement run here. I don't know that any of them is good in fantasy after like a month from now. The way that they would be like if the Bulls blew it up, Patrick Williams got good after the trade deadline, or if the Hornets decided to just shut down Gordon Hayward for the year, Jalen McDaniels would see additional playing time. So that's the way they get there after the trade deadline. Very short term, I'd like Patrick Williams for like a week. And then Jalen McDaniels, if you want to just not have to worry about it for like the next 3 or 4 weeks, he probably makes more sense there. I just got Giannis for Butler and D'Lo. Good trade. It is if you're punting free throws. Because right now, Giannis is not ranked very high. He's number 135 in 9 category leagues because he's the worst punt free throw player we've seen since Dwight Howard 15 years ago. If you're punting free throws, he's marvelous. If you're in a points league, he's marvelous. So if this is points leagues, great. 9 cat, not punting. Ugh. I'm assuming you're in points league or you wouldn't have done it. Yeah, sell high, man. But the question is, can you get top 30 for him, which is what he is when he's playing well, or are you going to get outside the top 100 when he's playing poorly? I think he just levels in the 50 to 60 range. So if you can get better than 50 to 60, you sell. If you can't, you just ride it out. DeJounte Murray, rest of season. Probably in that 25-ish range would be my best guess. He's been kind of up and down. You've seen the complexities of trying to play with Trae Young. He's right around number 30 right now. So 25 to 30 range seems pretty fair for him. Dan, should I trade my Jalen Brunson for his Bradley Beal and Kelly Olynyk in a 20-team points league? Wow. Well, I mean, you're getting Beal back for Brunson. And I mean, this one really is so team specific. Can you deal with the fact that Beal's going to be out for probably another week, week and a half, and Olynyk's out for probably another week, week and a half? If you can sit on those guys, especially if it lingers, if they're each out for 2 weeks, if they're each out for 3, would your team get decimated by having to squat on those dudes? Because in a 20-teamer, very much they all should be rostered. So I'm going to say yes. Royce or Pat Williams in a point league? Well, Royce has the longer rope here because KD's out longer than DeMar DeRozan. But in the very immediate sense, I would rather stream Pat Williams tonight. I mean, yeah. But sort of a loaded question because, I mean, Karis LeVert is the 6th man. Yeah, you know what? Karis came off the bench again yesterday, didn't he? Yeah. No, so Rubio's not the 6th man. He'd be the 7th in a best case scenario. No. He's not playing back-to-backs. Rubio isn't. It's going to be a really slow ramp up. No, I don't want anything to do with it. Yeah, there you go. Some horrible, horrible schedules. Woof. Yay, Roto! I don't have to worry about that in 70 to 80% of my leagues. People join me on the Roto adventure. KJ Martin rest a week for points and threes. Did something happen to Eric Gordon that I didn't hear about? Should I say I wish? That's not nice. I don't actually want Eric Gordon to be hurt. I just don't want him to be playing. They sent John Wall home. Couldn't they send Eric Gordon home? No, I don't really much care for KJ Martin. He only gets like 15, 16 minutes a lot of the time. That's nah. Keegan Murray, he's a tough one because there just isn't really any room for him to do more in Sacramento unless somebody goes down. What I need to see out of Keegan Murray is what I've said on this show a few times, and that is I need to see him do something besides just shooting a really good 3-point percent. And I haven't seen it, and I don't have any reason to believe that it's going to happen the way the Kings are currently constructed. An injury to Harrison Barnes would probably be the thing that helps Keegan Murray the most, but Harrison's also very durable, so I don't think that's going to happen. Reminder, by the way, everybody, we're doing our end-of-show lightning round. We do this at the end of every one of our live shows if time allows, which it does today. So throw your questions in the YouTube chat. It's over here or down there, depending on where you're watching. Do follow me on Twitter, at Dan Besbris. If there's anybody watching that doesn't follow me on Twitter, this is your chance to go do it. We do a crap ton on social media. And again, hey, reminder, click that thumbs up. There's more of you watching than thumbs ups clicked. I'm watching you. And please do subscribe because I'm going to try to do this every day if I can. It probably won't be every day, but I'm gonna do my best. Bol or Kessler long term? I'll go Kessler. Give Bol another game or two, by the way, in most formats, just to see if he's going to play again. It'd be pretty weird if he didn't come back at some point from COVID. Lowry for Duren or Jabari Smith Jr. I would take Lowry over Jalen Duren. Jalen Duren, you're going to get a lot of rebounds and field goal percent, but he doesn't score a ton, and he doesn't get defensive stats which is weird for a big man, and it is going to keep his value down because he's also not that great of a foul shooter. I like Kyle Lowry. I know you and me, you guys know me as the old man dude, but I don't think Duren has that high of a ceiling. Kyle Lowry, is this where he's going to be? You know, he was rolling top 60 for a little while there, which felt kind of unsustainable, and guys were out. So, yeah, 75 range. I was kind of hoping he would be inside the top 90, and he's been able to do that. Oh, sorry, this is D-Lo, not Lowry. D. Lowry? I don't know where my brain went there. No, this is D'Angelo Russell doing more than expected because they've had guys out. Anthony Edwards missed a couple of he missed one ball game. Very little. He's been quite durable. Cat's been out forever. That's the one you really need to worry about. When Cat comes back, there's just going to be less to do. So expect a little bit of a tapering there. I'm 10-2, but I'm scared. I also have Paul George, so I'm scared about Beal's recurring hammy. Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, if you can take on the injuries, you do it. And if you can't, you don't. I can't really tell you whether or not you can, but the fact that you're 10-2 means you're probably near the top of your league. So I would strongly consider it. I've given these twice, actually, in this podcast, so I'm going to refrain from doing it a third time. Sorry about that, David. You side the same way I do, that Vandy and Kessler are in a bit of a platoon for starting. I have Vandy, and I am slightly concerned, but not too much. Yeah, you know, I'm with you there, Matt. I think Vanderbilt, I mean, he had like 3 decent ball games in a row. It does feel like a lot of this stuff right now is matchup based, but with Olynyk out, most games I think you can expect that Vanderbilt is going to get to do like enough to have his kind of 90 to 110 range value, which is just barely above schedule stream, but he's been there all season. Thoughts on Melton? I talked about him earlier in the show, but I'm holding. Remember, it takes him 3, 4, 5 games to figure out his role every time they shift him around. Pat Williams or DeAndre Hunter? I'll go Pat Williams, but I also love defensive stats. And Hunter is really more about, if he's shooting the ball well, field goal percent and 2-pointers. He's been on a heater, though, and there's no Trae Young, so he'll have volume. It's a tough one, man. I think these are both relatively safe streamers tonight. I just lean Pat Williams because I love the roundness, the delightful roundness of his fantasy game. Hunter's fantasy game, not quite so round, but I think they'll both be pretty good. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate all you guys. Really want to ship off Dinwiddie. I have to admit, I haven't looked to see where he's at lately. 74. Yeah, I don't blame you. If you can get equal value back, I would do it because Spencer's been sort of slowly coming down. He was at 45 and 55 and 65 and 75. Probably levels off like around 75 to 85 range. But yeah, I don't blame you, man. He's never really had the fantasy game to support everything else. Although his free throw shooting has gotten better this year. That was always the spot. He got to the foul line pretty often, but was only like a 79, 80%er. So it was like a neutral thing. Now he's actually doing a slight positive impact there. And that's why he's been able to move inside the top 100 among everything else. And the field goal percent being near 46 instead of 43 or 44 has also been useful for Spencer. But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't really blame you. I think, this is probably where he's at. And we're an hour and 11 minutes deep on this thing. So I'm going to go because I'm hungry again. Everybody have a wonderful day. Again, at Dan Vespers on Twitter. Like and subscribe to our YouTube page. Hoping I can do this thing tomorrow. I don't have a sitter tomorrow. So put my YouTube show questionable tag for tomorrow's cast. Toodaloo, everyone. Love y'all.